Okay, so today we're going to be doing multiplying and dividing rational expressions. I'm going to take you through a few examples, and there's going to be a list of steps that we are going to follow. And let's begin. Hold on. Okay, so first steps first, never divide, flip, and multiply. Factor first, and simplify and state restrictions. So now we are going to simplify. There you go, there's our first question done. If you didn't know what I did here, I crossed out 7, that becomes a 1. I crossed out 14, that becomes a 2, because 7 and 14 are divisible by 7. So, it becomes a 1 and a 2. And then I crossed out the x to the power of 3 and the 4. And just because x to the power of 3 is cancelled and x to the power of 4 is cancelled, and then I was left with negative x and the 2. Moving on. Okay, so 4 and 12 are divisible by 4, so the 4 becomes a 1 and the 12 becomes a 3. Because it's n to the power of 2 and n to the power of 5, we cross out n to the power of 2, and then we turn this n to the power of 5 to n to the power of 3. And then negative 5 and negative 15 are divisible by negative 5. So this becomes a 1 and this becomes a 3. Going down here, we are left with 1 on the top and the 3 on the bottom. And then we're left on 1 on the top and 3 on the bottom. And we're left with the final answer of 1 over negative 9 to the power of 3. 1 over 9 n to the power of 3, and our restriction is n equals 0. Our restriction is what n cannot be. If it is just an expression of, like, for example, negative 15n to the power of 5. Negative 15. This n cannot be 0. However, if it was n plus 2, then n cannot equal negative 2. It's just because n cannot be 0. N cannot be 0. So, just letting you know that's what restrictions mean. No restrictions, as on the bottom there are constants, so there's no variable on the bottom. And with restrictions, it has to do with the variable. Like if this negative 4m was on the bottom, then it would be m cannot equal 0, because when we input into the function m equals 0, then it just doesn't work. But if it was like a mathematical expression like x plus 3, then x cannot equal negative 3. Moving on. There you go, there's our answer. Moving on to the next set of questions. Okay, I'm just gonna Okay, moving on to the next set of questions. Remember, it's never divide, it's flip and multiply. Uh, 3 and 12 are divisible by 3. So 3 would be 1, and then 12 would be 4. And then x would be crossed out, so it's cross out this x, and then cross out that 2. And what are we left with? X over 4, and the restriction is x cannot equal 0. Because x was on the bottom, they were both on the bottom, and x cannot equal 0 if it's just x by itself. But then again, if it's an expression of x plus 3, then x cannot equal negative 3, because x cannot equal 0. So just letting you guys know that. Moving on. Okay. So if you didn't know what we did there, we didn't divide, we flipped and multiplied. And then we have 6 and negative 3. So that's negative 1, and that's 2. Because they're divisible by negative 3, or they're divisible by 3. So that's why it's negative 1 and 2. And then I have y to the power of 2 and y to the power of 3. So we cross out y to the power of 2, and then we cross out the 3. And we're left with y. We are left with y over 2 times negative 1 over 1. And we're negative y over 2. And again, y cannot equal 0. And that's what we are left with. We have another division statement. Again, we don't divide. We flip and we multiply. And now here, we have negative 15 and 10. So I'm going to cross out this one. It would be negative 3. And that one would be 2. And then I have 2 and a 3. There's not much I can do with that. They're not cancelable. But I do have m to the power of 2, which I can cross out, and then I cross out this 4, and then I'm left with 2. So let's see what we're left with. Negative 3 over 2 times 3 to the m to the power of 2 over 2. So I'm left with negative 9m2 over 4. Okay, moving on. We have negative 8t to the power of 4 divided by 3 divided by negative 6 to the t, negative 6t to the power of 2 over 5. And again, it's another division statement. So we're going to flip and we're going to multiply. Three and 5, those aren't divisible. But this -8 and this -6, this would be a 4. And this would be a 3. Because there's negative on the top and the bottom, so they cancel out. And then I have t to the power of 2, which I'm going to cross out. Then I'm going to cross out this 4 and write a 2. So I have 4t2 over 3 times 5 over 3. So I have 20t2 over 9. And again, t cannot equal 0. Moving on. Now we're going to move on. We have another division statement. So what we're going to do here is we're going to flip and multiply. This one would be 4. This one would be -3. And I have a 3 and an 8, and I can't really do much with that. But I have an x to the power of 2 and an x to the power of 5. So I'm going to cross out the x to the power of 2, I'm going to cross out the 5, and I'm going to write a 3. So what am I left with? Moving on. Okay. So this is a multiplication statement. So we're just going to rewrite them down here. The y's will be the blues, and the reds will be the x's. This will be divisible. It's both divisible by 2. Cross out this y. Cross out the y, and then cross out the 2. So I'm left with 1 and 4y. And then I have 3 and 9 divisible by 3. So 3 would be divisible by 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. And 9 divided by 3 is 3. And then I have an x. And an x to the power of 2. So I cross out that x. And then I cross out that 2. And then I'm left with 4xy divided by 3. And again, x and y cannot equal 0 because there's y and x on the bottom, and it was just by itself. It wasn't with an added or subtracted constant. So the restriction there would be x and y cannot equal 0. And then and that's that for restrictions. Moving on. So this is a division statement. Blues will be the n's and reds will be the m's. So I have 3 and I have a 6, so this would be 1, this would be 2. I cross out that n and then I cross out that 2 right there because n and n2 are divisible by n, so n would be crossed out and n2 would now just become n. I have an 8 and a 5 and I can't do much with that, but I can cross out this m2 and this 3. So m2 and m3 are both divisible by m, so m2 would be crossed out and n to the power of 3 would just become m. What are we left with? 8m 1n times 2 over 5. So this would be 16m over 5n. And m cannot be equal to 0. Okay. Okay, moving on. Okay, so we have a multiplication statement, so there's no need to flip and multiply. And we're just going to rewrite them down here. Okay, blue will be the t and the 12. And red will be the x and y's. So 4, 1. So 4 and 12 are divisible by 4. So 4 would become a 1, and the 12 would become a 3. And then we just have a t squared there. Okay, and then we have y would be crossed out on both sides. This 7 and 21 are both divisible by 7. So 7 would become 1, 21 would become 3. And then x would be crossed out, and this little 2 right there would be crossed out as well. And what are we left with? 3 over t squared times 3 over x. Okay, so we have 9 over t squared x. And again, x, y, and t all cannot equal 0. Moving on. So this is a division statement. So again, we're going to flip and multiply. Blue will be the 7, so this would be 7 would be 1, 7 would be 1, and we're left with B3. Okay, so -4 would become a -1, and 8 would become a 2. A would be crossed out, the 4 would be crossed out and become 3. And let's see what we're left with. Okay, so we are left with -1 over 2a3b3, and again, a and b cannot equal 0. Moving on. This is a division statement, so we are going to flip and multiply. Blue will be the t's, so this would be 1, this would be 3. Red, this would be 2, this would be 3. Cross out the m, cross out the 2. What are we left with? 3 t times 3 2m equals 9 2mt. T cannot equal 0, and m cannot equal 0. And there's our answer. Moving on. Another division statement. Okay. So I have a -3 and I have a 4c. There's not much I can do with that. I can cross out the b's. I can cross out the a and the 2. And again, A, B, and C cannot equal 0. I am left with that answer. Hopefully it's right. Moving on. So, going back to the first page, never divide, flip, and multiply. Factor first, simplify, and state restrictions. Moving on. There you go. It's 24/15. And x cannot equal positive or negative 1. Because as you can see here on the bottom, we had x minus 1. Meaning if this was positive 1, x would be 0. And then we had x plus 1. Meaning if this was negative 1, x would be 0. And we can't have that. So moving on. Because we had an m plus 3 on the bottom, if m was negative 3, m would equal 0. And we can't have that. And then we have 8m to the power of 3, meaning m cannot equal 0. Moving on. This is a division statement. Here's our answer. We had an a plus 2 on the bottom, so a minus 2 plus 2 equals 0, and we can't have that. So a cannot equal negative 2, get a 9a to the power of 2, meaning a cannot equal 0. Moving on. There you go. Moving on to the next question. Moving on. And what are we left with? 2 over 2x. And there's our answer. Moving on. So, there's the answer. If you didn't know what we did, we simplified the question into factored trinomials, and we crossed out what was common. We crossed out what was common. We are left with an answer. And then we did restrictions. If you didn't know, 5 would be 5, -1 would be 1, +6 would be -6, and +3 would be -3. So that's how we got the restrictions there. Now we cross out. And we're left with a plus 4 over a plus 2. And then for our restrictions, again, restrictions focus mainly on the bottom. So +2 and +2 would be -2. Then +3 and -3 would be plus and -3. As for their counterparts, and there's our answer. Moving on. Time to strike out. And there's our answer. Moving on to the next question. (12a) minus 15 minus 4 equals minus 19, and then 1 plus 5. Time to cross out. There you go. Moving on. So now we're simplifying these complex trinomials into factored trinomials. Time to cross out. Last question. something I forgot to clarify, because we're flipping and multiplying, this will be on the top and this will be on the bottom. Okay? I forgot to clarify that last question. Time to cross out. Okay. 4w plus 7, negative 7 over 4. 2w minus 3, 3 over 2. 4w plus 3, minus 3w minus 3 over 4. 3w minus 2, 2 over 3. And then because these two were on the bottom, it was covered right there for this one. But because it was on the bottom in the first part of the problem, we have to count it as a restriction. So for this one, negative 5 over 4. Alright, so those are all the questions that I have for you today. I hope that it was informative and that you liked it. If you have any more questions, feel free to comment. Thank you very much.